Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining Savannah Institute's Novel Financing Partnerships in Agroforestry webinar with Megan Murphy of Backyard Beauty. Today, she's going to be walking us through her collaboration with Nrcs and some other federal programs that have helped support her perennial farming efforts. As I'm sure we all know this far into 2020, some Zoom etiquette, but just in case, if you could keep yourselves muted throughout the presentation until the end. You can either raise your hand and I'll just call on you if you want to ask Megan a question, or you can put it in the chat box and I'll read it off, whichever one you prefer. We'll save some time at the end for some questions and answers. And then feel free to use the chat box throughout the presentation. I'll keep an eye on it and try to answer questions. Or if Megan mentions a resource throughout the presentation, I'll put the link there. So I will now hand it over to Megan. And I'm going to turn off my screen so I don't distract you and play the slideshow. So one second.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. All right, I'm going to go now.
You are good to go.
Okay, great. All right. So I do want to thank Michelle and the Savannah Institute for this opportunity to share with everyone today. I wish that I had seen my presentation before I got started with Nrcs, so I hope there are folks on the call today that haven't yet started or are thinking about it. Again, my name is Megan Murphy, and I'm going to share about specifically my partnership with the Nrcs, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and how that catalyzed and financially supported my efforts to start my perennial farm. And a few things before I get started about my situation. My husband, kids, and I moved onto my family's Centennial Farm in central Illinois a few years ago, and we rent the 8-acre farmstead grounds from the Farm LLC. The Farm LLC has about 275 acres, most of which is in commercial corn and soy production. Thus, I am a beginning female farmer who is renting 8 non-agricultural acres from a landlord who farms commercial soy and corn. And my goal for this presentation is to provide information that will facilitate more people planting trees in their landscape. And you can go on to the next slide. I hope to do this by focusing on these 3 topics related to the Nrcs: compassion, conservation, and cost share. And just to point out that the background photo here is us using a tree planter to plant some of our bare root trees this spring. You can go to the next slide. So this is a photo of Jonah and Jamie, the Soil and Water District employee and Nrcs employee with whom I had the pleasure of working with when I first began investigating options for planting trees and shrubs on my farm. I worked most directly with Jamie on the right, and I'm so grateful for the lengths to which she went to investigate, to understand, and pull together the best cost share options for my particular goals and farm. She has since she's moved to another Nrcs office, and still I can call her up, I can ask questions and get support from her. But the more I've learned about the Nrcs employee responsibilities and the breadth of programs that they manage, the more humbled by and grateful for their services I become. So I wanted to begin with compassion. When you bring compassion to any partnership, you bring an integral piece of a successful experience. And here are just a few things to consider that could reinforce compassion in your NRCS partnership. The first is that NRCS programs can vary year to year, state to state, and sometimes with employee interpretation. Thus, they have a somewhat moving target of program specifics with which to be familiar. The second, and this one's specific to my area, but I'm sure others could relate, that most farmers in my area are commodity corn and soy growers. Thus, the NRCS representatives are dealing primarily with corn and soy projects. This makes it likely that specialty projects such as agroforestry or perennial farming are not at the front of an NRCS employees' minds, and they might not have had exposure to or experience in navigating the details of what and how their NRCS programs can support agroforestry. And the third thing I wanted to share with this compassion piece is that NRCS is a government agency and by its nature has layers of paperwork and bureaucracy. And with all of these considerations in mind, I have even more appreciation for the work that NRCS employees are doing to support us in being good stewards of the land. And you can go to the next slide. Oh, thanks, Michelle. She got all of the acronyms there on the left-hand side. So now on to conservation. Again, NRCS is an acronym for the National Resources Conservation Service. They are an agency housed within the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They have county offices in every state and are ultimately there to support us in being good stewards of the land. In addition to providing programs that offer financial cost share for stewardship efforts, they're also a phenomenal resource for technical support and information. So here we have a table that I got from the Champaign County Soil and Water District that shows the 3 primary programs within NRCS that can be used for agroforestry efforts. Each one of these programs has different criteria. They have different contract lengths, different rules, and more. And it really comes down to clearly communicating with your local NRCS representative to navigate the best path forward for your farm. NRCS employees represent specific counties, so it's best just to Google and determine who you should reach out to. So when I first started investigating these programs, I first started with the CRP, just investigating it, the Conservation Reserve Program that's at the bottom. And I got an estimate on cost share on planting 3 to 5 tree rows around my family's row crop acreage. And this ultimately turned into just a great experiment in testing the waters around farming ideas with my mom's generation, but it was not a realistic first step for beginning my perennial farming experiments. So the CRP requires that their contracts are within the agricultural acreage. And that was not something that I could mess with at this time. So then Jamie told me about the Conservation Stewardship Program, which is in the middle there, the CSP. And here is my personal impression of this amazing program. A farmer sits down with their local NRCS rep. They answer questions about the practices they use on their farm. And then the NRCS rep enters this information into their evaluation tool, and this spits out a score. And this score is equivalent to some monetary value for what practices are already being done that are conservation practices. If the farmer wants to add any enhancements or improve upon their practices, they can create a contract with the NRCS that ultimately pays them for the conservation-minded practices that they're already doing, and then have access to additional cost share to help them try out these new enhancements. So I mean, this just seemed like an absolute no-brainer. I couldn't, anyway. Apparently my uncle had looked into this program years ago and it had since changed. So maybe it's even more of a no-brainer right now. I have no idea, but right now it seems like a no-brainer. And I was so delighted that my family was willing to commit to a few additional enhancements that enabled them to sign on for a contract. And then my husband and I were able to engage in this contract with one of the enhancements we were going to do, which was the cultural planting for trees. And so we got to sign on to this 5-year contract with the CSP. So like I said, my husband and I were just a 1-line item on this contract, which was a 2-acre cultural planting in my family's 12-acre pasture. The cost share for this enhancement was $1,470 an acre. This turned out to be about half of the cost to establish the trees and shrubs that we selected. But it also gave us a time frame in which we need to complete this task, which certainly helped us get it done. So in addition to the CSP, my husband and I have also applied for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, or EQIP. And for that, we just needed to get My Family Farms LLC to sign off on it to give us permission. But our EQIP contract enables us to have cost share on projects that we're doing on the land around the homestead. This land has not been in agricultural production, so it does not qualify for CSP or CRP. And I first investigated EQIP as a way to cost share a high tunnel, and then quickly discovered that there are so many other practices that my husband and I were already doing, or things that we wanted to do, that the EQIP also supports. And some of these practices require more technical support or engineering consultation, like we wanted to set up a water catchment and water system, and that we elected to move forward without these in our contract because they were going to require more people to sign off on our work and give us technical support on how to set up our systems. So our EQIP contract presently is supporting us in establishing trees and shrubs as a windbreak, the cover cropping on our rotational farming grounds around the house, building bat and bird boxes, and purchasing a high tunnel. So there's just an overview of those 3 and how they related to my experience, but you can now go to the next slide. Okay, this one shows a screenshot of a Google search for the Nrcs tech guide, and that website is up there for you to use, because I really think the easiest way to navigate NRC websites is just to Google what you're looking for specifically. It's kind of challenging to navigate through the links there. So with this link, when you get to the technical guide and you go into the conservation practice standards and support documents within your state, then you can see all the different codes, all the different enhancements or practices that they have either technical support information on or cost share information. And this gives you an idea of all the different things that maybe you are already doing, you're interested in doing. It gives you an idea of what ways you could potentially partner with NRCS. So if you're interested in partnering with NRCS, I would first look through this tech guide. You'll just see the vast array of the enhancements. And especially if you're interested in agroforestry efforts, it just gives you an idea of what even exists. Like there are silvopasture, alley cropping, you can see even here. There's so much here that I wished I'd known about when we were first starting too. It's so exciting. Let's see. So another thing, and includes the compassion part too, if you are aware of the things that NRC is offering and you bring this with your goals to your local NRCS rep, that can help you and the local NRCS rep better navigate how to make these programs work for you. It's like I said, sometimes they might not even know that some of these things exist, or they might not have as much experience in working with them. So the NRCS has the goal of enhancing our natural resources. And when we share this goal, there are so many ways to successfully implement your agroforestry visions. So if you go to the next slide, this is another screenshot and another way to navigate partnership ideas. But this gives you a way to also get information on the cost share or the payment schedules. So again, the link was too long, so I just have, Google NRCS state payment schedules and select your specific state. Again, just another way to see the many enhancements available and get some idea of the cost share. Jamie had shared with me, the NRCS rep that I worked most closely with, that typically the cost share goal is to cover half, sometimes more, but the cost share is not to cover the expenses, but just to help to be at least 50% of the cost. That's just something to keep in mind, but it's helpful to know what their payment schedules are. So you can go to the next slide. Okay, so here I just wanted to show real life people doing this work. We've got a picture of my family crew on the left. They've just finished getting all the bat box pieces together to hang up on our shop. That's just one of the things we got to do with our EQIP. And then there's a picture on the right there of Savannah Institute interns and employee Katie, who we had the most awesome trade this summer. They came out and I gave them a tour of the farm, and then they came back later and helped me plant one row of trees in my windbreak that's part of an EQIP contract. And it's just awesome to have help. Partnerships are so great. So wanted to celebrate that here. And you can go to the next slide, which is where I want to end, is a twist on John F. Kennedy's quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And the twist being, ask not what your local NRCS can do for you, but what you can do for your local NRCS. And I had asked Jamie a couple of weeks ago when we spoke about this talk coming up, what can farmers do to support the NRCS? And she said, I so rarely get asked this question, I have to think about it. And that alone kind of made me feel sad, but she continued to offer a few things that we can do to give back to this amazing partnership. And the first thing she suggested was sharing our success stories, particularly of beginning, veteran, or socially disadvantaged farmers, that sharing our successes due in part to the support of NRCS is such a great way to give back. And the other thing she suggested is that every state has an NRCS technical committee, and that we can make suggestions or share ideas with our local rep or directly to this committee to further the ways in which NRCS can support us in being good stewards of the land. And especially if there are, as we navigate new perennial farming endeavors, that's such a great way that we can give suggestions to this organization on ways to further support us. So I know this is short and sweet, but I wanted to have enough time to talk or ask questions, and I'd love to know what other folks are doing too. And I just appreciate your time and listening, and would be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. That was awesome. And I think, honestly, with the size of group, if everyone just wants to, if they feel comfortable, you can turn on your video and turn on your audio, and let's just have a discussion. people are interested in that. We'll make it a little bit more interactive.
Yeah.
Hi, Linda.
That was great. Thank you. I guess I have a question. So Megan, how did you start your farm? I mean, did you just draw up a plan for what you wanted to do before? Hi, Jim. Before you went into NRCS, and how did you get there? Because I'm sort of at the beginning stage right now, and I want to have a better idea of what my plan is, what I want to do before I go into soil and water and NRCS, so I can express that to them.
Yeah, having a clear goal is always so helpful in moving forward. But I mean, for me, I really did start with, I want to plant more trees. It was that simple.
Okay.
And that was the best part about, I mean, knowing what I know now. I happen to have an NRCS representative who is passionate about that type of way of farming as well, and never got an opportunity to talk about that with people coming in. So for both of us, we were learning what programs existed within NRCS and how to support tree planting. And like I said, I started with the NRCS drawing up, well, what if we put 5 rows of trees around the perimeter of all of your farm acreage? And I mean, one thing now I can say is, having done the 2-acre planting through the CSP contract, it's so easy to draw maps. It's so easy to draw pictures. And then it's really different when it comes down to, digging a hole and planting a tree in that space. I mean, I had so much anxiety about this 2-acre planting before it happened. I was just so nervous about being responsible for the well-being of all of these plants, and wanted to make sure I could take good care of them. And so that was one thing that just made me so grateful that the CRP, that planting the 270 acres perimeters of trees, was just a ridiculous endeavor to think of starting with. And so having this chance to do these little, what I'm calling experiments around my farmstead, have been so helpful for my sense of capacity, what it takes to take care of a tree or shrub, just what it takes to get things in the ground. And that's going to be different for every person. I have 2 young kids. My capacity is different than what I hope it will be in a few years. That's a moving target for people, I'm sure. So as far as having a clear goal about what you want to do, I mean, I think it's always great to start with, the stars kind of thing. What is your dream? What do you want? What's the big picture for yourself? And if you could draw your map of exactly what your end goal would be, what would that be? And then think about where you can start. And that's a great way to also start your conversation with NRCS, because these contracts, the CSP is 5-year, the EQIP is a 10-year contract, but they want you to get it done as soon as possible. And the CRP is typically, my awareness of what I was hoping to do with the tree planting, is a 10-year contract. But what I'm trying to say is that once you finish your contract, and like the EQIP, if I got all of the things done in my first year, my contract would be done. Then I could apply for another contract if I wanted to. It's not an all or nothing kind of thing.
Okay.
So that's just helpful to keep in mind, because again, it's kind of bite off what you can chew and know that there could be more opportunities to do more.
That's great to hear you say that. It makes me feel better, because it's like just that nervousness about not feeling confident in what you're doing and digging that first hole. So that I'm not the only one feeling that way.
There's such responsibility for caring for living things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Where are you located, Linda?
Northern Illinois, Woodstock, Illinois. And what town are you near?
I'm closest to Champaign-Urbana.
Okay.
I think Woodstock's a great name to start a perennial farm.
Okay.
Is anyone else on the call? Have you already started planting? Are you hoping? Where is everyone else in their farming dreams?
We're just getting started, hoping to plant trees in the spring. And actually right now, like in conversation with our local Nrcs rep and trying to figure out which programs we can use to help pay for that. So this has been super helpful. And actually, I would love if you could provide any insight on choosing between, or maybe we can use multiple between this like CRP and EQIP and CSP for putting in windbreaks. Specifically, we're trying to eventually go into an alley cropping system, starting with windbreaks.
Well, again, that's where, I mean, having your Nrcs person is the best person to help you figure out with your specific situation, because CRP and CSP have to be used on land that has been in agricultural production, I think, for the past 60 years. So if you're trying to do alley cropping in your already existing fields, that would work for CRP or CSP. The nice thing about EQIP is, like I said, we could do that around our farmstead, which has just been outbuildings and metal piles and chicken coops and stuff like that. So that gave us the flexibility to do things closer to the house. And also it's an area that my mom's generation is more comfortable with us experimenting with. And yeah, I think, again, I would just lean on your Nrcs rep to help guide you through the best choices for your specific situation. Is there anything more? I don't know if I answered all of your question.
No, yeah, that is helpful. Yeah, no.
Anyone else in there in planning mode? I can't see everyone at the same time. I wonder if there's a way I can. I'm on my phone, so I don't know how to navigate as easily through here.
There should be a view option where you can see gallery view.
Okay. That's okay. I'm less familiar with the phone stuff, so. Well, raise your hand if you have a farm or have ground that you're wanting to plant on. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay.
Looks like most people. That's really exciting. Where is everybody coming from?
Yeah.
Sorry to jump in there.
No, that's great.
Where's everyone coming from?
Kendra, how about you go first?
Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm up in Minnesota, over by St. Cloud area.
And what's your situation?
And, my partner and I just moved onto a 9-acre hobby farm in the spring, summer. So we're still very much in planning mode on what we're going to do with the land. This is the first time that I'm hearing about Nrcs. So it sounds like there could be a lot of good tools in there for, I guess, developing our land and moving forward. But yeah, we're in very, very basic, like still exploring the land, still finding like weird things in the woods and determining where buildings are going to go and where animals are going to go and where we're going to plant stuff. So that's where we're at.
That sounds great. It's so nice to have the luxury of time. And I feel like perennial farming that's one of the biggest lessons of perennial farming is the appreciation of time and how things unfold. So have fun learning about your land.
Thanks.
Okay. How about Jem? What's your situation?
Yeah, I'm actually located also in Woodstock, Illinois, along with Linda. Linda and I know each other, so that's kind of fun. But kind of on both ends. Sorry, I missed like the first half of everything you said, so sorry about that. I had another phone call I was on. But mostly just interested in learning about these programs. We also just bought and moved on to a small kind of farmstead property that we're currently furiously trying to fix up the house and get that fully livable. At least we got moved in here recently, but have a lot of planning and figuring out to do with the land. And so yeah, I'm personally interested in these programs and what they could offer, but I also work for an organization that does work in land access up here in northeastern Illinois. So also just work with a lot of young farmers and beginning farmers, and want to kind of have these tools in my belt, I guess, to be able to help coach them along and kind of, yeah, be a resource to them in that way too. So
That's great. What I was saying about partnership with Nrcs and my local experience was that the Nrcs agency doesn't have as much experience with agroforestry projects. They can count on one hand the number of people have come up to them to ask them, we want to plant elderberries, and like, okay, that's not corn or soy. So I'm excited to, especially when you're working with other organizations, to foster the communication about the benefits and how we can work together, because it just reinforces more awareness of all the things available to all of us.
And I just add in, the more people who ask their NRCS staff about that, even if at first the answer is, I don't know anything about that, I've never heard of elderberries, or I've never heard of that practice, or any of those things, that if they get enough questions, that can drive them to ask their state staff or national staff or other people to say, hey, there's really a need for a training on this. And that's a lot of the role of the center I work for. But I just think that that piece of farmers and landowners asking for that information can't be understated or overstated, because it's the main driver of decision making, is those kinds of requests. So I know it can be frustrating when you get a response of, I've never heard of elderberries or whatever, but it's really helpful and can lead to good things. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Well, this is something I had shared with Katie and the interns when they came this summer, but it makes me so happy to have tree tubes on our property, because they are a visual. They are a conversation starter. Like, what in the heck is that? What are you doing in your pasture? And same thing, I feel like just the more we can share what we're interested in and doing, the more we can break down maybe the stereotypes or the just that there's a lot of ways to engage with the land, and that there are more ways than how we're presently primarily engaging, I should say.
Some partnerships that I found really useful are partnering with local universities and looking at the department. If you want soil testing done, who can you reach out to within the soil department and start that partnership? Because I've worked with some really cool professors there, and it's turned out he's like, oh, well, I'll give you free soil testing if I can dig a pit, things like that. And so just exploring what options lie there too.
Mm-hmm. It's a great way also just to know of more resources because I feel like universities are usually already tapped into the network. So that's great.
I have a question, if that's okay. I'm working on the same farm as Gavi actually, and we're located in central eastern Illinois, right on the border of Indiana. And we're doing something that kind of sounds similar to you, Megan, converting cropland that's been in Gavi's family, and that's in corn and soy row crops. And so also working with an older generation that is a little less motivated to change. And we've been kind of repeatedly contacting our NRCS officer, and has had like kind of a tepid response. And it kind of, I think, sounds like what you guys have been talking about not being super familiar with agroforestry. But I was wondering if you have any like suggestions for what to do when it becomes like kind of time sensitive, when we want crops for the spring and we want to order seedlings for the spring.
Yeah, I asked Jamie if she would be willing to be a resource, because she is such a champion for regenerative agriculture. And it really, everyone has a personality. So depending on where you live, you might have more cooperative or less cooperative opportunities with your representative. So I would encourage you to call Jamie, and I can share her information, and she can either connect you with another representative and you're close to your area, or she could give you the information directly. So I appreciate you bringing that up, because we're all humans, but that's another benefit of this being a national network, is that it's not just up to your local person. It is a national network, but so we can all lean on one another to support one another moving forward. Does that help?
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. If, because I'm on my phone, I'm wondering if you could, how about, Michelle, I email you Jamie's contact information, and everyone on the call could have access to that? What's the best way?
Yeah, I can, in the follow-up email after this presentation, I'll share this presentation, the recording of it, your PDF slides, and then I can share any other additional information that you want me to.
Okay, great. So
It'll
we'll
come
include
in an email either today or tomorrow.
Okay, great. And Sophie, I just wish you the best in, I think the family dynamics or generational dynamics are certainly a part of this, what we're doing right now. I mean, that is, I feel like what we're up against in change. And I've heard a lot of statistics about like the amount of farmland that's going to be changed over hands in the next decade or two, because so much of the land ownership is in people that are going to be moving on in that time frame. So just to share that, for me, it's been so helpful to focus on what I can do, because there's so much. And it's actually quite overwhelming for me to think about even the 275 acres of this farmland. Like at some point, I anticipate that I will be responsible for that land, but I'm not yet. And I'm actually grateful because like I said, like learning about capacity, it's like, okay, this 2-acre planting was huge for me. And I'm learning so much from that. And that's where I can put my energy and my focus and know that that's serving me and everyone else by putting my focus there.
I also had a really quick question just in terms of like the logistics of using these sorts of government funding opportunities. Do you end up paying and then they reimburse you, or like how does that transaction work?
No, I think it is probably different depending on the program, but I can speak presently. Yeah, I feel like everything is like, well, it depends. But I know from my experience with CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program, that is just a contractual, like, let us know when you've completed this piece, and in our federal time frame, we will compensate you for that contractual piece. So like this October, November, I anticipate that the LLC will be given the money that $1,470 times 2 for the 2 acres we completed. They'll get that in November, I expect. And then for the EQIP, I think it's different. We haven't put up our high tunnel yet. We've done all the other pieces, but we haven't submitted our receipts. We're supposed to submit receipts, and geez, even within the EQIP, it's probably different, because like the high tunnel is a weird thing, because when we determine what company we're purchasing the high tunnel from, they cover the costs, and then they have an agreement with NRCS, and whatever's left over from the NRCS cost share, then that company, like Farm Tech, for example, will send us the check for what remains. So, and I don't know how long those things take, but it's more immediate than the federal time frame. So again, I think it's specific to what you're doing and which program, and it varies.
That's super helpful. I was just looking at high tunnels on the Farm Tech website. So
okay, yeah, it's pretty cool for that specifically, because you don't have to outlay $9,000 or whatever it's going to cost for your high tunnel. You know, it's a lot easier to get the bill for $3,000 than $12,000 or whatever out front. So yeah, I just can't believe how supportive these programs are. It's so cool that we have this cost share support. I mean, it makes experimenting, or it makes taking the dive into this larger perennial upfront cost so much easier. So just so grateful that they exist. I want more people to know about it. Let's see, did everyone have a chance to share where they're at? I don't know, Laura, if you want to share who you are and what you're up to. Maybe, okay. Kate, do you want to
add to programs like the NRCS and the high tunnels? I was a farm manager, a nonprofit farm before I had this position, and applying for those assistance programs, they were always like, tell everyone, because not enough people know about these things, and we have these funds and nobody's using them. So I think, and that was in Minnesota, so I don't know if that's true in Illinois or Wisconsin, but I know at least in Minnesota they were like, tell all your friends, and maybe that'll make more funding available in the future for people, kind of like what Kate was saying. So I'm just going to throw that out there too.
I want to share it. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's especially true for some of, applying for windbreaks, applying for alley cropping if your state offers it, applying for some of these practices that maybe most of the farmers in your area aren't using. It very much is in response to demand. And so if an NRCS employee at the state level really pushes and says, hey, let's support silvopasture, or let's support alley cropping, something that's maybe a little bit less traditional, and then there are no applicants, it's really hard the next year for them to defend that again and again when they're not getting applicants, which is not trying to put it all on farmers by any means, but it's just that push and pull of trying to make sure we demonstrate support through things like, phone calls and applications, and even just conversations can really make a big difference.
I wanted to share some of the things I learned about the differences, like with CSP, that is a contract that didn't seem to be competitive. I don't know if that's true, but it did not seem to be competitive. It's more of like, are you going to improve upon what you're doing? Great, sign here. And then EQIP is competitive. So I know that I was told when we received our contract through EQIP that one of the reasons we got our contract funded and other people did not was because we had more diverse things in our application, that we had more points. So if I had just applied for the high tunnel, I would not have been awarded the contract. That I think that EQIP is sometimes synonymous with high tunnel for people, because it's kind of one of the people know about that program maybe more than other things within EQIP. But because we had the bat boxes and bird boxes and cover cropping and windbreak stuff in there. And there are so many other things that we would love to get credit for doing, or like I said, we want to do like water catchment stuff, but that was going to require hiring an engineer to help us design a project. Anyway, because we had more things in our application, we had more points and were awarded that contract. So another thing just to keep in mind, if there are things that you're interested in doing, another reason to look at that technical guide of conservation enhancements. Look through that and see if there are things you're already doing or things you want to do, because that will only serve you in your application, and kind of reinforce what Kate was just saying. People want these things. People use these things. We need to keep them. So.
I also just want to reiterate the, not the partnerships, the importance of collaboration and the importance of partnerships, because maybe you can't hire an engineer to help you design the water catchment systems, but maybe there is a civil engineering department in the university and students need a project. I mean, I've done that in the past too, where I've worked with students, and you still need to pay a civil engineer to sign off on their plans, but it's significantly cheaper. And so just thinking really creative about, okay, well, I have this need. Like, who can help me fill this need? Well, it's like a symbiotic relationship. Like, how can I help them help me, sort of thing.
I have a question about timing. Like, what is the timeline like when you're working with these programs? Like, for example, would it be realistic for us to think that we can go in and ask for assistance on like a planting that we want to do in the spring, or do we have to think further ahead?
You have to plan a little further ahead, because you're, like, for example, when quickly after I learned that I wasn't going to sign up for the CRP 3 years ago, I very soon started the EQIP application, because we figured out that there was a windbreak enhancement in there that would enable me to plant the trees. I just got funded this year. And if you do anything, if you pay for anything before you have the contract, you can't be reimbursed. So that's one of those pieces of compassion, and also helping with your planning, just that you're working with their time frames and their ways of, I mean, we're in crazier times than normal right now too. And sometimes the farm bill doesn't come through when it typically is supposed to. And there's just a lot of variables, and you never know what the timeline is really going to be. So I think it's just great to get your goals in order as best as possible. And as soon as you know that there's something that you can move forward with, to go ahead and get your application going. Because even in that application period, there's times for reviewing, editing. Oh, I could add something else. So I think it's great to go ahead and get your application started. If there's something specific you can start with, and then know that it might be 3 years later before you get it.
It's a way too to start building your relationship with your local Nrcs or SWCD person. And I know of some folks who have had really great opportunities where it's like, it wasn't right for them to do it 1 year, and then that person hears about a special program that's maybe targeting pollinators, or a special program that's targeting a certain goal, and then they can sort of think of you and hopefully reach out and connect too.
Michelle, what's our time check right now?
Well, and it's 12:22
Okay,
on my
great.
computer. So.
Great.
Yeah, we can wrap up unless anyone has anything else they want to talk about, share. And we have a nice little community here right now, so if you have an issue you want to work out with us all, it'd be a good space to do that. Yeah, or if Megan, you have other things you'd like to share before we end the webinar for the day.
If there are any specific questions about like the 2-acre planting, I'd be really glad to talk about that. Just like I said, I was pretty anxious about it before it happened. I mean, just there's so much that goes into picking what varieties, where you're going to source those things. Gosh, you hope they arrive on time, the weather variabilities on when you can get the ground prepped. And, you know, there's just so many moving parts, it feels like. And if you are interested in doing what I feel like is a large scale planting like that, I'm glad, please call me. I love talking about this stuff. I love knowing that others are interested in it. And I'd be glad to share some of the things, you know, lessons learned. And also just, you know, this is just my first year. I haven't yet made it through a winter to see, you know, of what I could have done better previously. But like, for example, I'm here on a windy day and I've got tree tubes that are laying down on the ground, a few of them. And it's because we use bamboo sticks, because that's what we had available. We, you know, my husband and I both love repurposing, reclaiming, you know, using materials that are around the farm, for example, and bamboo sticks was one of those things. And it seemed like a great idea at the time. But now I'm spending a lot of time going back and either putting in new bamboo sticks, and now I'm actually going to be putting in metal or fiberglass rods, just so I'm not going out and repairing these things all the time. And even just like what tree tubes to buy. You know, when I was searching for I had specific varieties of plants I was looking for. A lot of them, like within the currants and elderberries, I had specific varieties I wanted. And it was hard to find what sources to get them from. And so I came across a couple of links of like extension offices or extension services. And I sent those to Keith, and I sent those to the Savannah Institute. But those are things that, if that was on their website, or these are great resources to have pooled, so that we're not all recreating our own wheels every time we're going through this process. The more we can share, and we can all build on each other's lessons learned and help ourselves as we move through what is our own experiences. They're all going to have different variables, but there's so much we can share to help each other along.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, if you're not familiar with the Savannah Institute, check out our website, go to savannahinstitute.org. We do have a ton of resources on there. And then on our Facebook page, if you're looking for something, I need an elderberry contact, like reach out to us, message us, and we'll try to connect you. We have a pretty large net just all across the Midwest, and then a little bit beyond as well. Like Kate's calling in from Vermont, and we work with her a lot, which is great. And then also just to say that we have a conference every year. It's a gathering, and this year it's virtual because of everything. It's called the Perennial Farm Gathering, and it's a space for farmers to get together and network. And we have a few really amazing panelists involved with that, and a bunch of different topics. So check that out too. It might be a really good place to network and start this journey, or continue your journey if you're midway through. So I'll just say that for my organization.
I'm going to add one more thing that I really want to get in, because it's part of my long-term vision. I think that one of the things all of our communities are in need of are more processing places to help diversify and reinforce diversifying our crops. And so, you know, I love thinking about these hub and spoke models where we have processing plants all over, the different processing plants across the states, and that can help inform what crops are grown there. But we can also help inform what processing plants are going to be in our area. So, you know, I'm specifically interested in black walnut processing because we already have black walnuts on our farm. And I know other people have them around on their farms, and they're kind of just seen as a nuisance that they have to pick up these walnuts every year. But Just as an example, I love talking about the long-term vision of these perennial crops and how we can share pulling our crops together and processing them and reinforcing the strength of our communities in that way. So if you want to share your long-term visions too of what crops you're interested in, or if those types of conversations would help you inform what crops you want to grow, I just think those are really powerful conversations to talk about. Okay, I'm in love with elderberries, but what am I going to do with them? And I know that what informed a lot of the selection of the plants that I put in the 2 acres is that I create a lot of medicinal and value-added products, and a lot of the things that I presently buy online, I hope to grow myself. But still, there's so much potential for pulling my resources together with other local farmers to do something more for value-added products.
So Megan, what's the best way in this follow-up email that I'll be sending everyone? What's the best way for people to contact you? Do you want to add your email address, or should we send people to your website?
I included that on the very last slide, but my email address is just emailing is the best way to communicate with me. And I'm glad to call on the phone or FaceTime or Zoom chat, whatever, if it's easier. But my email is backyardbeautyil@gmail.com. And I'm a part of the IDEA network, and I would encourage all folks on the call to sign on to that. I think it's Illinois. It's not Illinois specific, but I think that's how it got started. But those types of networks, I think, are just the best way to foster a sense of connection and that we're all in this together. And things like the perennial gathering for Savannah Institute. I mean, those are just great ways to remind ourselves that there's more people out there trying to do these things too. That we're not in this alone, and that we get to learn from each other and support one another in this work.
Amen. Beautiful note to end it on.
Thank you so much. This was so helpful and inspiring and supportive. Thank you
Great.
for doing it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you
you
all
so
for
much,
joining
Megan.
today. That was wonderful. And for the good conversation after. I'm glad we did it this way.
Me too. It's so much more fun than listening to a talk the whole time.
Absolutely. Well, everybody have a wonderful day. You can follow up with me if you have additional questions about any of this, or I'll be sharing Megan's information as well. And let's all just keep talking and working on this together.
Yay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.